All right, welcome to Out from the Cube. And Jayson, you actually gave me some homework that I don't think you gave. I don't think you gave me homework when we were together last week. But here's my homework. We are on episode 64. That is what we're on. I'm not guessing. I'm not thinking around a number. We are on episode 64. So,
I love it.
So we're moving. And I bet you, and I don't have this answer. This is what I should know. I don't know how many episodes you and I have recorded together, but I guess it's probably somewhere around maybe 10, maybe somewhere 8 to 10.
I would say 8 to 10, yeah.
That we've done. So I appreciate you again finding time. I know you're busy. You have a lot going on. This has been great. We were you said something maybe a month or so ago. You and I were talking offline just about the business and the coaching and mentoring, and the word that I really like that you use that I need to think more about is the word facilitation. And I maybe we can get into that a little bit about what that word means and how that impacts you and how that is a part of your kind of daily routine and what you do for a living now. But you said something else that I liked. You said and I'm not going to get the exact story correct. And so I want you to expand on this, because you being on this podcast make me cooler. Do you remember saying something along those lines of that you were with people or had been in different environments where people just felt like being around you just kind of made them feel cooler? I think you used the word cooler. So
people being around me made them cool.
Yeah. So and I'm saying this absolutely. So I say that about the podcast. Now the podcast is growing. It's a cyclical thing. It's a long, slow runway to get this plane in the air. I don't know if we're off the runway yet or anything like that, but the podcast is growing. And without question, the feedback that I have been receiving and the positive feedback, I haven't really received any negative feedback. I think as you get bigger and have a better audience, or not a better audience, a bigger audience, that people will come out of the weeds and start kind of getting after you a little bit. But the podcast is growing. It is slowly I think it's being successful, and we are receiving positive feedback. But the positive feedback really seems to be around the two of us. This episode, like, when are you going to be with Jayson again? That episode with Jayson was amazing and all that. And so when I've received that feedback, I'm like, Jayson just seems to make me cooler. And I think I thought you said something like that. You said something like that in a conversation we had offline, and you may not remember it.
No, I actually do, because I remember the context and where it happened. It happened, it was told to me the year that I worked corporate. The first year that I retired from playing basketball, and I worked in an industry that I didn't even know existed, and it was a trade show driven industry. And here I am, the 6'8" black dude, let's just call it what it is, around a bunch of sales guys. Mm-hmm. And my coach at the time, I always remember him and I actually still talk. His name is Chad Gilpin, and he's lifelong salesman, whether he was in true sales, door to door, B2B, or in the restaurant industry. And I told him, I was like, Chad, like I'm the basketball guy, and I know that I'm a talker, but I feel like people are always like intrigued by my story. I feel like I'm talking too much. And he allowed me to say it once, and then I said it again. I think we were even in Charlotte. I think I remember where we were. We were in Charlotte, even a trade show. And the second time I said it, he said, like, Jayson, like, that's because everybody wants to hear your story. Like, you make people feel cooler than they are. And that's what he said. He said, and this is, and obviously not to get into any racial things, I just want to set the table. This is a white guy who's not much older than me. And he looked at me and he said something that was really profound to me. And I hope this isn't offensive. I'm saying this as it was, but he said, white guys are looking for things to make them cooler than they are. That is exactly what a white guy said to me. And he said, you are that person. And I didn't take it in an offensive way. I know that he didn't mean it in an offensive way. And I don't think that's a racial thing. I think that was him. That would be like me saying, black guys say whatever. Like I don't even know where that's going, but just to table. Because I don't even, again, to get into the racial thing, I think everybody's doing that. I think everybody's looking for something to make them feel cooler than they are. Whatever cool is to them, and cool is, it's perception. So, it's just like success, it's just like greatness, it's just like anything else. Whatever your perception and your personal definition of cool is, I think we're all looking for something to make us cooler than we are.
Yeah. I think there's that connection and that feeling well, let me say this. I think it has to do with me personally. I think it has to belong. I think it's two things. I think it's a sense of belonging to a group where like, hey, and then it's that sense of being connected to people. Yeah. So I think it's belonging and connection. Like all of a sudden,
my word. That's that 19 word.
That's your word, right? But I sit back and like, if you and I are connected and you and I end up being around one another and we do this podcast together and we end up being tight with one another, there's a sense of we belong together, as goofy as that might be, right? There's a sense of belonging. And I'm sitting around going, man, Jayson's just kind of a cool guy and I have this connection with him and I feel like I belong with him. And so there's this feeling of I'm important too. Like there's some value to me. And Jayson wouldn't hang around people that don't bring value. Like Jayson needs me maybe as much as I need him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be hanging out.
Without a doubt. Like you said this, and I've said this back to you. But like now, I'm getting into the groove. This is at least 2 weeks, and I want to say maybe even 3 weeks that we've done this, recorded this on a Thursday morning. And I'm at the point now where I'm looking. Not only am I looking forward to conversating with you, but I'm looking forward to the Thursday morning because I know that my Thursday morning is going to have this as an inspiration. And I think, again, I have it written down right here in my pad when you said a few episodes ago, how do we consistently find ways to tap into the things that inspire us? Well, this is it. You know what I mean? For me to know that my days normally start off pretty great, but my Thursdays now have an extra kick to them because once I get up, work out, do my thing, I got at 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a set appointment with George. Right. It's vice versa, bro.
Well, I appreciate that. I do find myself using phrases that I hear on these podcasts. And I'm going to show you something here in a second. There's 3 or 4 things on my mind right here. One is, that type of stuff gives me goosebumps. And I heard that this morning from an Ed Milet episode that I'm watching maybe for the 3rd time. But I want everybody that listens to this, because we are getting I don't know if it's a following. We get people that download this and listen to it.
It's a following.
It's a following, right?
It's a following. Right? Call it what it is.
Right. But this is the thing. For those that don't know, Jayson and I have no prep for this. And I'm not saying that to say that we are great or that we can just ramble on and on and on about things. We literally do not discuss, send a text, send emails, or have any prep on what we're talking about. And when we got off, we recorded an hour and 20-minute episode last week. When we got off, I said, Jayson, we just talked for an hour and a half almost, and with no idea what we were talking about, where we were going, the rebuttals, the slants, anything. And I really appreciated your comment, not in making myself feel better or anything like that, but it's important, I think, for people listening about. Do you remember what you said? Because I think but I think you even said it this morning. Well, you said something along the lines that it's just authentic. It's a conversation. It's you and I just wanting each other to be better and sharing our experiences and maybe things we're learning through the week or things that we saw online or in person or other conversations we had that we want to share with one another to make each other better, right? Yeah. That's how I took it. Now, that's not exactly what you said, but that's how I took that, what you said last week.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And that was actually what I was going to say was, something about the authenticity, something about the connection. I don't know if we exactly talked about it, but when there's this thing, my business partner / business coach / now really good friend, Leslie Peters, who is big time in the leadership world, published author. She is who I've had the opportunity to sit under when you talk about learning how to develop and deliver these facilitation type settings. she mentioned something to me that has not only resonated with me, but has now totally transferred into something that I not only am consciously thinking about, but have consciously implemented into my content, is the fact that we live in this world of small talk. We live in this world of just, hey, how are you? Hey, how's the weather? You know, whether it's somebody walking up, do you play basketball? You know, whatever it is, it's such a small talk driven world.
Yep.
That there's no real connection and real conversation. But then there's therapy.
Yep.
You know, which most people are intimidated by or can't afford or whatever. Like there's this taboo to therapy because, you know, I'm laying on somebody's couch telling them all my deepest, darkest secrets. But in between that is back to real conversation, and through real conversation comes real connection. And it's man, like I don't know if we talked about this either. I don't believe in the words irony and coincidence. I just don't, because I feel like everything has its predestined course. And I know I talked a lot, you know, in the spiritual realm last time we talked. And again, not to make this some divine episode or anything like this, but like I just feel like this thing is already mapped out. And the reason that we don't understand it is because we can't comprehend on that level. And so I tweeted something the other day that said that you have to collect the dots before you connect the dots. And that's it. Like we're sitting here trying to piece this thing together as we go. You can't piece it together. The biggest cliche quote in the world is hindsight is 2020. Hindsight is 2020 because you see everything that's happened. There's no way that you can foresee what's happening in front of you. And so, you know, all that to say authenticity and you know, true connection, that's where it stems from. I just saw this where I was going with the irony thing. I just saw this in a podcast episode that I watched with a guy named Tom Bilyeu. He had a comedian turned leadership developer. His name is Kyle Cease. And the first 3 minutes of the interview, he was talking about preparation. And he's like, he verbalized something that I feel. He's like, if I prep, then I'm not giving you my most authentic self because I'm giving you these prepared answers. And so if I come in prepared, if I were to come in with notebook on notebook on notebook of how I'm going to answer that question, imagine how quickly I get thrown when you deviate from that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And so because we don't get to that point, we end up just having true conversation and saying what we feel. And, you know, man, I know this is geared towards a certain audience for you, but I'm really capitalizing on the platform of being able to talk about some things. I'm even actually playing around with starting my own podcast. We talked about it a little bit offline last week, and titling my podcast "A Glimpse of the Truth," and just talking about things that I told you. My first book is going to be called "The Things We Know and Do Not Do." You know, I feel like let's as I'm looking at this, let's challenge thought. Let's make people think. And that's what we do. We live in this world where people don't want to think.
No. So, you know, when we were offline last week, I wrote down some of our notes and we continued to talk. We talked for an hour and 20, and then we probably talked for another 10 or 15 after that. And some of my notes that I wrote down are exactly what you just said. Small talk versus therapy. And the middle is where real conversation is. So yes, to our audience, and like, I think like I love all this. I could talk about this stuff all day and be inspired by it all day, but without question, I'm 45 years old. I bet you most of my life has been on the, you know, whatever side of that spectrum, but on the small talk side of the spectrum, right? Of putting up walls, not being real introspective, not wanting to grow, not wanting to go too deep, not, you know, no, all that sort of stuff. And then I have been in therapy, not like personally where I've got but like marriage therapy, relationship therapy and all that, where you are sitting there trying to go real deep on all this. But then having that friend, that colleague, that community, that team, that parent, that employee, that client, where you're sitting down and having real, transparent, authentic conversation.
Absolutely.
And I will say the past year, going on 14 months, I'm living in that middle, right? I've heard a lot recently about not living in the middle, but this is where I think you want to live, or where I shouldn't say that for people. That is where I am choosing to live, where it's not on this. It's not with the game on in the background and being locked in on that. It's not sitting at TGI Fridays with my phone, which I saw this past week. I was amazed by that this past week because I'm consciously doing that. I went to a Mexican food place with some friends and was sitting there, and the family next to me, there were 5 of them, all on their phones.
Oh yeah.
All of them.
Like, why do we go?
Right. And I'm sitting there, and we put our phones away, the people I were with, and we sat there and just talked. And I was like, it's, so, what's that have to do with getting out from your cube and being, interactive and collaborative and community and all that sort of stuff with your clients and your business and your teams and all that is, man, just like be real with people, be committed to the people you're with, and selfishly, like, I am locked in on our conversations on Thursday because I know that when it ends up being 9:15 and we log off and say our goodbyes till next week, that I'm a better person because you and I had a conversation.
I appreciate that.
And that's without question. I do want to say this, to pivot off this probably a little bit. This struck me this morning, and I've heard this maybe 2 or 3 times. The guy's name is Dean Graziaso, and I still can't get it right. And I've mentioned him a number of times. He's really good. If you go to Ed Milet, if you're into this stuff and you're listening to this podcast and you want to listen to a great story, Ed Milet has an episode with Dean Graziosi, something like that. And it's a phenomenal talk. But at maybe 15 minutes in, and I've written this down now 3 times, in 3 different episodes of taking notes on this episode. 15 minutes into the episode, Ed Milet stops Dean and says, I don't know if you've ever been told this before, and it just struck me, and we know each other a little bit, but not like we're boys or anything like that. But he says, and I have it written down here in my daily notes, and I wrote it down to remember it, but then I wrote it down to ask Jayson this question. And this is exactly what he said. He goes, that we don't know each other real deep, but I find myself, because of your presence, because of your spirit, because of how articulate, knowledgeable, and intellectual you are, I find myself rooting for you. And I wrote that down, and then I thought about you and just kind of thinking about our talk today. I was like, I'm definitely like that with Jayson. Now, Jayson and I know each other. We've worked together, and we know each other well. To say that we go have drinks every Friday or Saturday night or we check in on each other to see what we're doing, we don't. And that's fine. That's fine. But we have gone out and had drinks. But I do find myself rooting for you. And one, I guess, there's 2 parts to this question. One, why do you think that is? And it's not just you and I and our relationship. There's something about you individually, and I'm probably not the only person that says that. But 2, what does that have to do with the people listening to this and how does that intersect? How does that question or that phrase, I find myself rooting for you, how does that have any impact on the person that is sitting in their cubicle, writing code, selling shoes, selling cars, or whatever it is I wonder what people think about you, me. Like, do I have that spirit, that drive, that authenticity where people walk away saying, man, I'm rooting for George. Like, I'm rooting for that guy. Whatever he's doing in his life, 1, I'm rooting for him. 2, how can I be a part of it? 3, how can I support, help him get to where he wants to go? Like, that's when I say I'm rooting for you, Jayson. Like, I want to watch it happen. I want to be a part of it, and I want to support you. Right? I mean, those are the 3 things that I'm thinking about. And I'm wondering, so here's my question. How do you give off that vibe? How do you give off that? So when somebody walks away from you, they feel that same way that I do. Because I want that for me. Right? And I know that's selfish. That is a selfish comment. But I want to have that level of impact on the people around me that they walk away saying, hey, whatever he's up to, I'm on board and I'm going to help him. Right? That is that feeling. So I know that's long-winded, but that struck me this morning at 5:15 in the morning when I wrote that down.
Man, first off, thank you. Second off, I have goosebumps. And to answer your question, I can answer your question in one word: authenticity. Like, it is that authenticity that we just spoke about. Mm-hmm. And no, you're not. And you know me well enough, and hopefully the people that are listening have tuned in enough to know me well enough, relatively speaking, to know that what I'm about to say, it comes from the biggest place of humility, because that's who I am. I still refer to myself as a little boy from Cleveland, Ohio. Literally, that's how I refer to myself, because that's who I am. That's who I still see myself as. You're not the first person, the only person to say that I'm rooting for you. Whether they've said it or not, actions speak. But it comes from that place of authenticity. It comes from you, along with everybody else that connects with me, receives my most authentic self. And when you receive someone's most authentic self, you don't have to connect to their story, the content of their story. You connect to the emotion that they draw you towards. And people are drawn to greatness. That's why you watch and listen to and read the things that you watch, listen to, and read. Same thing for me, same thing for anybody else. And we're all attracted to somewhat the same people. May not be the exact same person. It may not be, it may be Dean Graziosi instead of Ed Milet. It may be Tom Bilyeu instead of Brendan Burchard. It may, whatever, like, the individuals may change, but we all pretty much, just like we all pretty much have this moral code of ethics of knowing what's right and what's wrong, I feel like there's also this code of greatness that we can all pretty much appreciate greatness. Mm-hmm. And can come up with some consistent appreciation for what that looks like. And again, as I know you study these people just as deeply as I do, the thing that I've noticed about all of these people in this world of greatness, in this world of high performance, in this world of, winning and championship, and I'm not talking about titles and rings, I'm talking about high performing, they're all authentic. Mm-hmm. How they got there, differs. That's the personal story. That's not the thing that we have some sympathy or even some empathy to an Eric Thomas who very openly says he was homeless at 16 and ate out of garbage cans. Or you've mentioned Ed so much that I did a little bit of research on his own, and I knew who he was. I just didn't know that was the name that was applied right. to him. And I actually saw something that I saw a while ago when he was talking about his story of how his dad told him to go to this job and ask for this guy, and he's like, who? We like, oh, Drunk Tim. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, Drunk. Right. And how he, got to the point of working with these young men who had all been traumatized in their childhood, and that was his connection. Like, but bro, when you get to the point where you're coming from a place, God, I got goosebumps bad. But this is what happens. Goosebumps are what happens. One of the things that I saw Simon Sinek talk about is he said, when you're tapped into your purpose, that is when your body gives you those things. You get goosebumps. You get that queasy feeling in your stomach. You get, teared up and yep. It's those things. It's why I don't care. You can get the hardest, toughest, most non-emotional guy in the world and throw on one of those ESPN E60s where they talk about somebody passed away and they used his heart to give it to a 3-year-old kid, and the 3-year-old kid just hugged the guy's widow. Damn it, you're gonna tear up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it taps, like, something like that taps into the emotions of who we are as human beings. And bro, I don't know if this is the platform. I would love for it to be the platform, but another guy that I've had the opportunity to sit at his feet and just learn from him is a guy named Fred Falker, who is a 67-year-old guy that has some very different views on diversity, bias, racism, and it's unlike anything that you've ever heard, I've ever heard. It's unlike anything that's being done in the workspace about diversity training and ABAR and all of these other things, inclusion, whatever term you want to, it is unlike any of that. And the the place that he and I are at is he is so intrigued by me because I understand it. And I understand it because of my experience. But the thing about it that he's attracted to me is through our conversations, through these conversations that you and I have, through these authentic conversations, I'm able to help him verbalize things that have just previously been thought. And it all revolves around the simplicity of simple and easy, my little phrase of simple and easy.
Right.
It revolves around the simplicity of it's not our connections that cause relationship. It's not our differences that hinder relationship. It is simply making the decision to close the gap and narrow the distance and start to see a person as a person instead of whatever line or box that you put between you. And that's it. Like, I don't know if you saw, I posted a picture maybe a week or so ago, 10 days or so ago, and it was a picture of me talking to a guy. And our mutual friend actually took the picture. So this guy, like everything about society said that not only should that picture have never been taken, but that interaction should have never happened, that conversation should have never happened, that connection should have never happened, that relationship should have never happened. But how it happened is he and I both decided to narrow the gap between any lines that we had previously drawn because of our experiences and our biases.
Right.
And say, I see you as a person. And we ended up having the time of our lives sitting in an Irish bar.
Right. I did see that picture. And I did like that picture actually quite a bit. That's one of those LB photography photos that he needs to, put a filter on. And, so that was pretty good.
It is, man, like this is the rabbit hole. This is the rabbit hole that I'm continuously falling down because as I have conversations with Fred and he just gives me different little tidbits of things to chew on and think about. But I understand it at its simplest form, and it's really that simple. Easy? It's not easy.
Right.
And this is something that I learned in South Africa. We all have biases. We're not talking about prejudice. We're not talking about so it starts with bias. Bias is what helped us evolve as a species. Bias is what allowed us to be able to, because all bias is the shortening of a decision-making process. Like, it only took us one or two times to say, oh, that's a saber-toothed tiger. You know what I mean? I don't need to continue to walk towards that to figure oh, that's a saber-toothed tiger. So what allowed us to be able to evolve as a species is to be able to make biases, create biases that shorten the gap of decision making. But then that turned into the isms, racism, sexism, all of these differences within the religious sector. That's what turned into that. Our biases turned into that. And when you break it back down to its simplest form of we are all just human beings. But if you say it like that, bro, that that means a lot of people got to drop a lot of things that have validation. Black people have a story. There's a story that's validated, and so do white people have a story that's validated. But again, when you get to a point, the content of the stories don't matter, bro. If I see you as a person and you see me as a person, you get that picture that I posted a couple of days ago.
Right. The reality is this.
Super deep.
No, I appreciate it. No. And listen. These these episodes that we record, listen, I started this podcast because I wanted to get better. That's it. I mean, that's a very selfish reason for me starting this podcast. Was I was sitting around super passionate about things, and I wanted to take all this content that I'm learning to better myself and then essentially distribute it out. I am passionate about this stuff. And I was passionate about me getting better. And I figured, hey, if I do a podcast, I've got to have some level of preparation. Like I need to be reading books, watching podcasts, talking with people, networking, going out to lunches, taking notes, and just getting better so then I can distribute this content out. That is selfish me getting better. So when we start, so you being with me and having those takes, that make, bias are shorten of gaps of decision making, right? But we all have bias, right? And so you're making me think a little bit deeper, which is good because, listen, I have friends that work at some enterprise level companies here in town that aren't getting things done because they have a bias on way things should be, or way things should work. And the people that they have to interact with and communicate and connect with have different opinions and different biases on how things should be done. And because that is happening, there's frustration, there's animosity, there's the collaborative, the communication, all that stuff is set really low. It's not happening, right? Where, to exactly what you're saying, there's a way to connect. There's a way for me to put some of my bias away. There's still, I guess, let me ask this. There is still a way for me and you to have different opinions or different biases, or I have a bias on something and still get things done, still connect, still have an appreciation, and still move forward, whether that be a product, a relationship, or whatever, right? There is, right? That's my question. It's a very basic question. There is still a way for you and I to have different bias and still move forward, correct?
Absolutely, and without a doubt. So yesterday,
but I gotta win. But I've got to win.
That is the issue. That is the issue. Yesterday, my late Marky and I went over to Mizzou. We drove over to Columbia last night. They played Alabama last night in Columbia. We drove over, and one of my really good friends, we played against each other in college. One of my really good friends is the assistant coach at Mizzou. And sitting in that same restaurant that you and I sat at the last time that we connected, he and I had a conversation. So let me lay this out to you. Chris is a 6'8" white guy who's now about 240, 250. He didn't used to be that much. From Belleville, Illinois. And he and I sat in that restaurant, and right around the time where this is, however long our president's been in office, right around that time, or right around when something happened, whatever it was. And that statement solidified our over 20-year friendship. We've known each other since our freshman year of college, played against each other for 4 years, and then created a friendship after that. And he said, brother, our differences actually strengthen our friendship. And, Fred would challenge that because he would say, no, our differences don't. But I know where he's going with that. It is that difference of opinion. Like, nobody really wants, some people do, but nobody truly authentic really wants a world full of yes men, a world full of people who agree. Like, I want the challenge of, I think differently from you. I feel differently about this from you. I want that. Most people want that. I don't know what the numbers are. I know I want to be around people who want that. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want people to just totally agree with what I say, and I don't want to totally agree with everybody that is in my circle. But when he said that, and we had, again, known each other for over 20 years when he said that, but when he said that, that was a defining moment for our friendship because it solidified the fact that, yes, we don't have to, we say these things, the things we know and do not do. We say these things. Oh, let's agree to disagree. Well, not really. Right. Not really. Not really, because I don't agree to disagree, because either I still disagree with you or we can't even come to it. But that statement that you said, I win, that's the one.
Yeah.
Is understanding that it's not a competition. It's not a competition. And nothing, yes, there's a place, athletics, and even in some business spaces where, like competition, healthy competition. But bro, even breaking it back down to its simplest form, and this is probably the biggest thing that I learned from math, not algorithms and the Pythagorean theorem. The biggest thing that I learned from math is how to break things back down to its simplest form. Because when you break things back down to its simplest form, everybody can understand it. So when you break competition back down to its simplest form, it's not competition against any external source. It should be a competition against yourself. And that competition against yourself should drive you to a point to where, okay, now we got some juices flowing. And healthy competition is wanting the best for both. Mm-hmm. That's healthy competition. And but nothing, wars, civil wars, world wars, any kind of unrest has been created because of competition. I have to win.
Right.
And let me say this, just to touch on what we talked about before, talking about closing the distance. Mm-hmm. If you see someone across the street, you closing the gap. Is that person across the street, does the street divide you, or is there just space between you? How you answer that question is how you will navigate through the rest of your life. That simple question. Is there space between you, or does the space between you divide you? So when you look across the street and you see a black man, there's division. We're divided, like something divides us. Our race divides us, our nationalities, our whatever. There's a division. And if we as people stop looking at differences as divisions and simply a space,
right,
the world changes. Everything changes. Everything changes.
Well, you brought it today, didn't you, man?
Yeah. Yes.
No,
because you said it. You said what's something that's on my wall up here, which is the challenge thought, and that is what I want to do. I want to put people in spaces. I'm not here to change you. I'm not here to change you. I am here to create the space to allow change to happen.
Right, and I'm not. So what I'm going to say is I'm not suggesting this is the definition. I would like to look it up, actually. I'm not sure what the definition of inspiration or inspire is. I don't. Right. But this is how I'm thinking about it. Right when we kind of started talking, being inspired to me is me walking away from something feeling I can do anything. Right. That is just kind of what I'm thinking. Like when we have our talks, or when I listen to Ed Milet, or, Bill Yu, or any of these guys, right. I'm walking around going, man, I can do that. Like I could have that impact. I could have that relationship. I could have that house, or whatever it is. My kids could do that. I could be that type of dad or spouse or whatever. Like I feel like I could be those things, right? And so you talk about, I have relationships in my life where where there's a divide. There is, right? There is a divide, and I see that division or that wall or whatever it is, instead of seeing that space. And I'm sitting there going, that is inspiring to me, because I can sit back and say, I can make that change. That can be me. I suck at that, and I can be better at that, and really being more introspective about it. So yes, this is a business, motivation, self-improvement type thing that we've turned this into, podcast. But everybody that's walking around their offices with 500 cubicles and the separation and not getting things done, or, having a bad attitude or whatever about other people, like, we can get better. Like, we can be inspired to, see the space. And I think that's big time, actually, to see the space instead of the wall or the divide.
It is the definition of the title. It is the definition of outside the cube.
It is.
How do you get, so So, outside the cube, outside the box, the reality of this thing, George, is there is no box. It's like the Matrix. Go back. I will challenge you to go back and watch the Matrix. Go back and watch. And the Matrix is one of those movies where, I remember it came out in 99. I'm 21 years old. And it was one of those movies that, along with Enemy of the State, I remember Enemy of the State being one of these movies too. But it was one of those movies where I started to think to myself, man, movie directors can't be that damn smart. Like they're letting us know something. They're letting us know something. And when you go back and watch The Matrix, there are so many different little things in that, like the thoughts that we've created are simply, they are not real.
Mm-hmm.
They are not real. And I don't want to get on some like this dude is off and loony type deal, but if you put yourself into, like, they are all created. The war in Israel is going on, is being continued to go on by a bunch of people who literally don't even really know why the war was started. You couldn't be, because it started thousands of years ago. So it gets to that point, just like we've all gotten into in our personal relationships, when you get to that point, it's like, what the hell are we even arguing about?
Right.
Like, what are we arguing about? And it is simply that. But like cubicles, they are imaginary lines. They are imaginary lines that you're supposed to be in this space, keyword space. Remove one wall, and all of a sudden the cubicle just got bigger.
Right.
Just one.
Mm-hmm.
And the cubicle, because now there's not one person, there's two people. You remove another one and now it's three people. So
yeah, I'm going to jump on that metaphor for a little bit. So there's a great book called The Culture Code. When I started the podcast, I think I spent the first 3 episodes on a book review of The Culture Code, and I love it. And I forget the gentleman's name that wrote the book.
Daniel Coyle.
Great book. He talks about now the guy, I'm forgetting the guy's name. Catmull, Ed Catmull, Catmul. He ended up taking over Disney, taking over Pixar, and changing how those companies worked. The number one thing he did was the first thing. So he took Disney over, I believe. I might get these backwards, but he took Disney over and had them just rolling. All of a sudden, the films they were doing and how they were releasing films, all that. So then he essentially then took over Pixar. The first thing, day one, that he did with Pixar was to essentially remove cubicles. He's like, we're taking all this out, because if you take this is how I took and how I choose to take the metaphor. You take these walls away, now we can collaborate. Now we communicate. Now we problem solve. Now we look each other in the eye. Now we interact in such a way that we can problem solve and get to the outcomes that we all want, right? And that it was the first thing he did, was this shared space of being together. And so when you talk about that, I know it's a metaphor for other things, but if you take these walls down, where now I can look at you and we can communicate and we can problem solve together, and we can, this is going to sound goofy, where we can fill one another, right? And, it gets, I think that so again, man, I appreciate you a lot. I really do. Because it's all, I just want to get, my deal is, and I've got it written down here in my book, and I had somebody actually over at my house the other morning where we were recorded a podcast here in my dining room, and I opened up a book and I just have it kind of underlined, and I can't find it now, but it says, just 1% better. Just better today than I was yesterday. And I hope that we all kind of have that mindset. I do want to circle back to one thing. When we started this, I find myself rooting for you. And we kind of went down that road a little bit, and that's how this started. You said something, and that I want everybody to kind of think about it this way. This is a Don Meyer phrase that I've used over and over again mentally. And when I have had friends, and actually when my brother became a CTO and a vice president of a company here in town, I told him this phrase. And it's a simple phrase, but you build your army. Every day you're building your army. And then you kind of need to sit back. When I became a head coach at a university, it was a small university in Michigan, that phrase was on my mind a lot, because I was by myself. And I was trying to build this program and culture and experience for people. And it was like, build your army every day, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And the phrase that Coach Meyer always used was, you build your army initially in terms of using sport phrases. You start by building your army with the trainer, the janitor, the secretary. Like, build your army with those people. So when you think about that and you're walking around your business, your team, your community, your supporters, your boosters, whomever it is, you're always building your army, right? Mm-hmm. You're always trying to make those people, to piggyback on what we started, 30 or 40 minutes ago. I find myself rooting for you. Mm. And that's your army, right? Like, Jayson, without knowing about it, I'm in your army. Like, you got me. Right? Whatever you do, wherever you go, whomever I come across that is in your space or needs to know you, like, I'm going to say, hey, you need to meet my guy, Jayson. Mm-hmm. Right? And, I'm part of that army. So it's that same thing in the business world. It's being out at these events or these networking events or these meetups or with your IT team, with the business team, whatever it is, you're building your army and you don't even know it. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you leave, they're saying, hey, I know this about Jayson. I know we need to connect with Jayson, or you need to go see Jayson for this, or go see George for this, and he'll help you with X, Y, and Z. Like, at the front of your mind, that's your army. And I wrote that down after as you talked. I was like, every day, pound the rock every day, build your army every day. I know that's kind of a sidebar.
And who do you do that for? As the person that is the soldier in the army. Who do you do that for? You do that for the people that you're connected to. You do that for the people that you believe in. You do that for the people that you have a genuine interest for. Right. And so this is, you and I have touched on this before as I develop this content of leadership. That third component is love. And Leslie, who I mentioned earlier, she challenged me with that. She was like, love in the business place. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. But you, without using that 4-letter word, you have told me that you love me, because my definition of love is I am committed to someone else's well-being. I'm committed to your best interest. Like, and if you, again, breaking it down to its simplest form, if you break love down to that form, and stop looking at it in its romantic sense or in its family sense or in it, like, just break it down as, I am concerned about your well-being, your best interest I'm concerned about, and call that love. Because now if we're in the workplace and if I'm the employee and I'm concerned about my employer's best interest and well-being, and he or she is concerned about my well-being, employer to employee, man, that sounds like the foundation of a flourishing relationship to me.
Right. Man, there's a lot to go over. And I love this. So it is, I'm going to circle back to this. I don't know what the definition of inspiration or being inspired is, but it's walking away from something going, man, I can do anything. I can be anything. I don't watch a lot of movies. I guess I'm slowly starting to watch more movies because there's some classics that my children need to watch, like Karate Kid, Back to the Future. 2 weeks ago, we watched The Goonies and, all that sort of stuff. Some of these shows that I grew up watching. But my oldest has watched this movie. My youngest watched it for the first time last weekend. And we watched Hoosiers. Which reminds me, I think you can actually rent that gym out, and I think we're going to rent it out and take a team over there and watch the movie and then practice the next day. That's our plan. So, side note, I need to remember that. So we're watching that movie, and for those that haven't watched it, it's a great basketball movie, one of the better ones. Arguably one of the better ones. It's a great team thing, and it's a great kind of culture thing, and it's a great thing about the Gene Hackman role of the coach saying, "Hey, we're going to do it this way." Is standing on the mountain alone, being the leader, getting things thrown at you, and having everybody tell you that you need to be fired, but standing firm to who you are and the direction the ship is going. Right, I love that, and they build this up. But to your point, and you had me think about this. At one point, I don't cry at many movies. If I know something is coming where I'm going to cry, I will leave the room. I forget. There's the film The Notebook. For some reason, got roped into watching The Notebook. At the end of The Notebook, I got up and left. I had to leave because I was about to just let it go, just let it go. But I cry at the end of Hoosiers. I cry at the end of, and I'm not sobbing, but my eyes are definitely glazed over in water. When Gene Hackman sits there and looks at these young men that have bought in, that care about each other, that have done something extraordinary that hasn't been done since then and will never be done after them, right? And he sits there and he looks at them and says, I love you. I want you guys to know how much I love you. And it's not romantic. It is sitting there, to your point. It's the first thing I thought of. It is, I care about you, and I am going to care about you forever. Wherever this goes from here, I will care about. Listen, I know we've talked about this before. I'm not sure I've asked this question before. Do you still have coaches that call you, check in on you, that reach out to you, not weekly, not maybe even monthly, but that you go 4, 3, 6 months, but they will somehow circle back around you and say, Jay, what's going on? How are you doing? How can I help you? Do you still have coaches that do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell so many stories about my college coach. So many stories to the point to where people get a total misunderstanding of how long I actually played for this guy. So usually when I'm telling a story about my college coach, I put up the air quotes. I'm talking about Royce Waltman. And the reality of it is I played for Royce Waltman for one season. Royce Waltman is not the coach that recruited me to Indiana State. Royce Waltman is not the coach that coached me for most of my career at Indiana State. Royce Waltman was the guy that came in after the guy that recruited me and coached me most of my career had an opportunity to go back to his alma mater and capitalize on that opportunity. And so going into my senior year, we had a coaching change. And Royce Waltman was the guy that came in. And Royce Waltman is literally a Bobby Knight disciple for those of us in the basketball world. He was on that team in his assistant coach role on that team when Keith Smart hit the shot. So he's a national champion. And I played for Bobby Knight without calling him Coach Knight. He was a yeller, a screamer, a cursor, a demeanor. He was all of that, but it stemmed from a place of genuine care. And you didn't understand that at the time. And most times you don't understand it in the moment. Coach passed away, 3 or 4 years ago now. And me playing for him for 1 year up to the guys that had the opportunity to play for him for 4 years, we all share this bond of memories about who he was, because we all know that as many MFers and SOBs that we got called, it was from a place, and that's a whole nother avenue to turn down when you start talking about how to do it or how it was even done then in comparison to how it's done now. But I am also a firm believer that you can coach, you can parent, you can teach as hard as you want to, as long as that player, that athlete, that child knows that that's coming from a place of love first. You can employ. You can be a tough-ass boss as long as that employee knows that that's coming from a place of love. And that's where we're at now. I heard John Gordon say something so profound. We grew up in the tough love era. Our parents, they raised us with tough love. Our coaches coached us with tough love. Our teachers taught us with tough love. And he said, nothing about that has changed except the order of the words. Now we have to love tough. This generation of young person, this generation of person has to be shown that they're loved first And as soon as they know and have confirmation that they're loved, they'll let you be as tough as they want to. So you can still coach like we were coached.
I think you're right.
You just can't start off with it. You can't walk into the gym calling them SOBs and MFs. You got to walk into the gym, and who knows what that process is. But
yeah, maybe you just said this, but I know you've said it in a prior podcast that all that starts with trust and connection, right?
Connection, yeah.
Yep. Once we have that,
let me roll reverse on you for a second. Let me ask you a question.
Oh, all right. This will be the first. I have 64 episodes, and nobody's ever asked me a question.
This is that spontaneity that you talked about. So a few seconds ago, when you talked about watching Hoosiers or getting to a point in the movie where you will literally get up to avoid crying.
Yes.
Why?
It's a good question. So let me tell this story. I watch another show. Listen, I fall asleep to comedy every night. I fall asleep to the TV. I've read that I shouldn't be doing it, but I like to fall asleep to comedy, stand-up comics, to shows that I find funny. That I've done that for a while. And I now fall asleep to a show called Impractical Jokers. It's 4 buddies that just do embarrassing things to one another, and they have to do it, right? And you have to do this. Otherwise, if you get enough strikes against you, you have to do this challenge at the end. And I literally fall asleep to it every night. So a few nights ago, there's an episode where one of the jokers is with a young child. And they have to say what is being said in their ears. They all have earpieces, and the other 3 jokers are telling them what to say. And they've got to say it, otherwise they get a strike. They're sitting next to a retired Vietnam veteran. So the joker and the child sit down next, and they're having a discussion. They tell them to say, you know, hey, you're getting ready to go on in life, and you're doing this, and the joker's talking to the child. And he was like, you're just not, this is not exactly what he said, but he said, you're not allowed to cry. Men don't cry. And you need to remember that going forward. And he's saying this. And immediately the Vietnam veteran shoots a look over at him. And this guy's, older, and he looks over at him, and then he goes back to reading his book. But the joker continues to say, you're not allowed to cry. Men don't cry. And finally the veteran interjects and says, that is wrong. It is okay for men to cry. It is okay to be that. And it went on. And the other 3 jokers are sitting there going, man, we're getting a lesson here. We're getting a lesson. And that right when you said that resonates for me. So why? I don't have a great answer. I don't know why I get up and leave rooms when the notebook, when the old man connects with his wife again, right? And he goes through this every day to connect with his wife who has Alzheimer's. And he does it for a day so he can have 2 minutes with her mind fresh on the memory of love and togetherness and all that. And then I think he crawls into bed with her and they die together at the end. I'm tapped out, man. I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. I can't do it, right? I can't handle, I don't know. I don't do it, right? There are certain things, I'm like this. There are certain things that will always tug at my heart, and I will walk out of the room when it tugs on my heart. And I know exactly what it is. When I see groups of people brought together that overcome things, that aren't supposed to do things. When when a husband and wife are together in their 90s and he crawls into the hospital bed, that is a togetherness, that is a connection that I struggle with emotionally. Then there's the team that isn't supposed to win, right? And they do. And they're together. It's not that they're all separated, right? It's that they all bought in. They're all together. There's an outcome, a goal, and a direction, and they do it, right? And I'm sitting there, and my kids are looking at me going, wow. And I go, hey, this isn't about basketball, gentlemen. And this is what I told my kids kind of with tears in my eyes. They did something great. Basketball's important. Basketball is important. And it's not about basketball. It just isn't. So I don't have a great, why do I get up? No idea. No idea. You know what would be good for me? To sob, right? That would be my therapy, right? Then maybe that's good, right? for me to stop. But there's something about a group of people doing something that gets me, man.
So here's what I hear, and this is why real authentic connection, real conversation is so much more important than therapy, because therapy is monologue. You know, therapy is business driven. Therapy is one person telling the other person all of their deepest, darkest issues, but there's no reciprocation of that. Mm. So there was a point when I stopped talking earlier in this episode where the only thing that allowed me not to let a tear drop is because you were talking. If I would have kept talking, I would have started crying. If you, whatever. We're taught that. Mm-hmm. We're taught that either directly or indirectly. We're taught that as men that we're not supposed to cry. We're taught that down the line. You know, our grandfathers taught our fathers, and our fathers or our father figures, coaches, whoever played that role. That's what we were taught. And think about how that. So we're talking now just like bias. So now we're talking just like war. We talked about the people in Israel and them fighting a fight that they don't even know. Like, why aren't men supposed to cry? You can't even answer that question of why men aren't supposed to cry, because it was never told to you. It was just told to you not to do it. Mm. And so now the difference between you and talking to Camden and Tyler, they're not that this generation of young person especially is not okay with because I told you so as an answer to a question that they asked you. We were okay with it because we were still working out of that fear, that extrinsic fear of, oh, because I said so. Why do I have to do this? Like they're not okay with that answer anymore. So somebody's going to have to tell them, why is it not okay for men to cry? And if you aren't able to give them an answer that they're okay with, then they are going to explore that elsewhere. And for me, you know, this is getting into the parental thing, but for me and my boys and the people that I come in contact with, alcohol, drugs, sex. Now, I'm not saying I'm having these conversations, you know, now with my 11 and 8-year-old, but one thing that I'm going to do differently than my parents did for me is I'm going to initiate those conversations inside of my house, which in my eyes is going to reduce the taboo of them wanting to do it outside of my house. And that's something that I learned in Europe. They start having sex education in 3rd grade, in school in 3rd grade. Why don't we do it in America? Because we think the more information we give them, the more inquisitive they'll get about it. Their theory and their facts and their science to back their facts say, because they know about it, sexual transmitted diseases are not as high, teenage pregnancies aren't as high, and every other thing that is related to that isn't as high. I say all that to go back to, my boys know that as a man, and I learned this from my father, not necessarily the crying part, but I learned that I could still be a man, and a man, air quotes again, and be domestic. I could still be a man and cook and clean and have a nice house. Like I've had women come to my house and basically tell me that there's no way that a woman, that I don't have a girlfriend or some woman comes to clean my house because my house is that clean. I didn't learn that from a woman. My mom did not teach me that. My dad did. And so my sons are going to know that, because it goes back to George, and sorry.
Go.
I'm gonna challenge you. Yep. I'm gonna challenge you because it is the premise of the title of this podcast. It is the premise of who you are, like outside the cube. Mm-hmm. In order for you to get outside the cube, the societal pressures that we put on each other, society says men aren't supposed to cry. Why? Because we're supposed to hide our emotions. Well, if you hide your emotions, you stay inside the cube. Mm-hmm.
No question.
If you can't express your emotions, the first thing in any setting, the first thing when people cry, what's the first thing they say if they're in a public setting? I'm sorry. Right. Why are you sorry?
Right.
Why are you sorry? For showing me something that has touched you enough. Go back. Something that makes me cry. Jim Valvano's speech at the ESPYs. What are the 3 things that he said we should do every day? Every day, if you do these 3 things every day, you will be able to go back and say that I have lived a life of greatness.
Yep. Bring your emotion. Yep. Go ahead.
Laugh, think, cry.
Laugh, think, cry.
And sometimes it doesn't. Nobody says that it has to be this tear-jerking, emotional, deep down cry. Sometimes you may laugh so hard that you cry. Right. But that release of emotion, like that release of emotion, man, and that is the point. I'm sitting here talking to Marky the other day, and I don't even know why I was so overwhelmed with emotion. She told me about a kid that she works with from Springfield that got this rare case of cancer. He's actually been living in St. Louis, but she couldn't go visit him because he was like in a bubble and nobody could go interact with him. He's now out of the hospital. He's lost all this weight. Hey, do you have any shirts that you can give to him? Mm. And I go in my closet and I find 3 XL shirts that still have the tag on them. And I fold them up and I say, it's not a whole lot, but it's something. Hey, I got a couple pairs of size 14 shoes. And as I'm giving her these 3 measly T-shirts and 2 pairs of shoes of my 100 and something that I have, I am literally shedding tears because I know that I'm about, like, I don't know this kid, but she does. And I care enough about her to know that the impact of that kid receiving something from her is going to, like, sorry. Like, this kid has cancer. Mm-hmm. And for me to be able to give this kid 3 measly T-shirts and 2 pairs of shoes, because I can't imagine. Yeah. And that's not like, I don't want a pat on the back for doing some serviceable thing. I want people to tap into the emotions of knowing, like, nobody cares about the dollar that you give the homeless person if the dollar that you give the homeless person is just to get them out your window. Mm-hmm. I would rather you not give the dollar to the homeless person and have a conversation with them and ask them how they are. How are you doing? Than to give them $1 and not mean it. Right. Sorry.
You covered it, man. I mean, I think we've gone through it all, man. We got
Tourette's a few seconds ago, man. Oh. My bad.
We got crying. We got some Jesus. We got the Israel war. We got it all, right? So listen, I can't appreciate you anymore, right? I really can't, for what I was going to do, and I'm going to do this next week. I was thinking about that this morning and then forgot, was I have a notebook upstairs. So when I started working with Jay, maybe 3 years ago, it's gone by fast. But when I started going into
the third, we're into 2 years now.
Yeah. So when I started working with Jay, this is just something that I just have always done. Definitely in a work environment, definitely in a basketball environment. I always had a pen and paper with me, always. And I was always taking notes. I have a basketball notebook in my basement on top of my desk, actually, that has probably a year and a half worth of notes from Jayson. And that's not an exaggeration. Every day I had the same pen, used the same cardstock paper, folded it into quarters because we had an hour. We had 2 1-hour blocks. And so each block that I folded the paper into was 30 minutes. And I literally, for a year and a half, this is a true story. I'm not hyperbole or anything. I wrote down everything Jayson said. When I was standing next to him, when he was talking to the group, and I have it all. And so I have this huge notebook of notes from every day. It wasn't 7 days a week, but it was like 2 days a week for sure, sometimes 3 days a week. And I'm going to pull that out because I meant to pull it out because I wanted to drive some of the conversation on things I've learned from you. But it just continues, right? And I hope that people that are listening, when Jay talks about being authentic, like, one, I hope that we take that away. Like, I hope I live that way. I hope I can have a conversation with people in my life, the clients I work for, the other people I work for, and my employer, like that we can just be, and my children, right? And my community and the school that my kids go to, that I can just be, hey, this is who I am, and I'm trying to get better. I'm not perfect, and I'm trying to get better. But what I hope, the things that Jayson is talking about, like, that is who he is, because I've got a year and a half worth of notes, and I have him talking to children about all this same stuff, and I've seen him interact with his kids. So, I mean, I can't think any higher of you, Jay, and appreciate everything that you've done. This is my commitment to you. One, I'm going to know the episode number for next week. The second thing is that when I get up in the morning and I know that we're going to be on and recording, and we do have this on the YouTube channel, that I will start to clean up and shave a little bit and not look so old with these videos, because I'm a wreck. I thought about that when we got on. I was like, man, at some point you just got to clean up, right? So, listen, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy and all that. I asked this a month or so ago, and I'm gonna ask it again, and I don't necessarily know the answer, and I don't know if you have it in front of you. But what are you reading right now? What should we be reading? What are you reading? What's impacting you right now? And maybe you said this last week, you're not reading as much as you used to.
I'm not. So I'm receiving my information in a different way. I feel like I'm almost at like information overload, to be completely honest. Just because I'm at a point to where, I want to start to process my own stuff. And so what I've been doing more lately is watching really Tom Bilyeu and his show of impact theory. And, I'm just throwing it out there into the universe. I am going to be a guest on his show, on that impact theory show. I don't know him. I've never had a conversation with him. I'm just throwing it out there. I love the way he delivers. I love the everything about it. But I find myself watching that because I find myself intrigued by the fact that he has, air quotes again, famous people that we recognize their names. And I appreciate the fact that he also has people who we don't recognize their names, or I don't recognize their names.
Right. So let me jump on that real quick. I watched one of his episodes yesterday with a gentleman named Brian Elliott. I thought it was great. If you haven't seen this is for everybody, not just for Jay. But if you're into Tom Bilyeu, if I'm saying that correctly, he has an episode that is not his impact theory, but he has an hour to an hour and a half episode with Gary Vee on the Ask Gary Vee show, where he interviews him in Gary Vee's office. Gary Vee interviews Bilyeu, and it's really good. He really starts out where he started and how much of a grind it was, and how hard it was to build his business, how he built his business. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's in the fitness industry, and maybe for not supplements, but just maybe health food or something along those. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, I think he's got his hands in a little bit of everything right now.
Right.
To be honest. Yeah.
Right. What I like about what you said, not to continue with the episode, because I know that we've gone long here. What I like about what you said, and I hope people think about, Jayson says some subtle things. I hope that you go into conversations really hunting for what you can get out of it to improve your life. Right. And that's how I approach these conversations. Jay said something subtle that I wrote down and had me thinking about this. He said, here's Tom Bilyeu that does this great podcast. He interviews all these quote unquote famous people. And Jay said, I'm going to be on that show one day. Right. I will be on it. I don't know how. I don't know the message I'll bring. I don't know him, and he doesn't know me. Right. But I am going to be on that show. And that I think the same thing. I actually have sent Ed Milet a note, and I've actually heard back from him. And I was really excited I heard back from him. And I said this, I'm inspired by you. I listen to you every morning. You get my mornings going. I get juiced up for the day because of your content. And one day you will be a guest on my podcast. I've said that to him. And he said, you let me know, brother, and I'll be on. Right. And I really appreciated his response. And his story of Ed Milet you touched on earlier, and it's really a great story. I actually sent him another note back and said, hey, Ed, appreciate your content, all that sort of stuff. But I said this to him maybe 2 weeks ago. I was like, Ed, you need to write a book. I think he wrote a book called Max Out. I go, your next book needs to be titled Cottage 8. Now, nobody will know what that means. If you listen to his story on how he changed his life came about that he worked with orphanage kids or kids that were in an orphanage, something along those lines. But he was sent, you told the story that he got a job because of Drunk Tim or Drunk Tom, and then he went and he got assigned to go work with kids that were living in Cottage 8. And he said that moment changed his life. And I was sitting there going, that's the book, man. Like you need to, so I wrote him a note. I did not hear back from him on that. But to your point, I think it's that mindset of, you know what, Ed Milet's going to be on my show one day. And it's the process of what I need to do in order to have him as a guest. And to you, it's the process of you sharpening your saw or sword and having Tom say, hey, Jay, I need to have you on my show. Right. Yeah. And it's that process. It may, Gary Vee wants to own the New York Jets. That might not happen, but he loves that process.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the whole thing about it is I actually we talked last week about names. I just actually renamed one of my keynotes that it used to be, trust the process. And then when the Philadelphia 76ers also eloquently wore that out, I changed it to enjoy the journey. And now just earlier this week, I changed it to the prize is the process. And it's simply that. It's like, we don't know if you get your eyes caught on the prize, what you think the prize is, you may ultimately miss what the true prize is. And the true prize is, all of the whatever buzzwords you want to put to it, the grit, the resilience, the learning, all of those things that you learned in the process of getting to where you think you wanted to go.
That's it.
That's the ultimate prize. And that, that was my whole thing, even with basketball. My goal was to never play in the NBA. Ever. As a little kid, that wasn't like, you say it, but it's not like that. That was not the reason I played basketball. And yes, there was a push once I got this close to it. It was let's go see if we can do this. But I didn't start playing basketball to go to the NBA. I started playing basketball because that's something that my friends and I did. And because it was something that my friends and I did, we did it often. Because it was something I did often, I got good at it. Because I got good at it, opportunities started to present themselves. Like so when I never made it to the NBA, and I, again, air quotes, only made it overseas, I was ecstatic with only making it overseas because, damn, somebody's paying me money to do this thing that I just started off playing in the backyard with my friends, and now somebody's paying me for it.
Right. So go ahead.
In between there, all the things that I learned in between there, those are the priceless things. You can't take those back. You can't take back how hard I know that you have to work, how consistent I know that you have to work, how disciplined you have to be with all the small parts of how to get to that. You can't take that back.
But it's who you become. So the mindset is, hey, I'm going to be on the Tom Bilyeu show. And and then when you unpack, like if that's the goal, right? If that is one of many goals, right? Who do I need to become to do that?
That's me.
Right?
It's me. It goes back to whether or not I'm ever on Tom's show is irrelevant. So me making that statement is the same as a 3-year-old kid saying I want to go to the NBA. It's the exact same thing.
Yep, sure.
The difference is a 3-year-old kid doesn't know what it takes to get to the NBA.
Yep.
At me as a 42-year-old man now, I know what I need to do to at least prepare myself for the process that's going to take.
Right.
And whether or not I ever make it on that show, I know how I'm going to develop as a person, knowing the process that is going to take me to do something like that.
I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, because you frame that a little different for me, right? So if you're sitting around saying you want that job, that responsibility, that office, that pay, whatever it is, right? The mindset then needs to be, or maybe in my mind, this is what I hear you saying, and it may not be right, but this is what I hear you saying that is inspiring me. Who do I need to become to have that responsibility, that job, that office, that team, that whatever it is? Who do I need to become? Okay, well, the people that have that seem to do these things, and I need to model that or mirror that and have those habits and those rituals. Like I need to do that. So, or I need to become that intelligent, or, you know, whatever it is, right? So you professionally sitting in your cube, who do I need to become? Who do I need to become to do that, to be that, right? And it's, you know, it is, so it's that personal development, personal improvement, personal journey, right? Of whom I need to become. Right. I really like that, actually. That's inspiring to me. I mean, that's just how my mind took what you said. Listen, we've gone long. I know you're busy. I actually have meetings that I need to get to put a ribbon on this. Listen, this will be up on YouTube. If you've made it this far, one, we appreciate it, right? So Jayson and I just have a talk where he gets to counsel me every week and inspire me for the weekend and to be a better parent, employee, and person for my clients. Again, Jay, I can't thank you enough. I really can't, right? If nobody gets anything out of this, although I know people are, and they really value you, because that is the feedback I'm receiving. But listen, we could go on and on, but what I read this morning and what I listened to Tom Bilyeu say in his interview with Gary Vee was he was chasing money in his 20s, and then he started chasing impact, and the money just came, right? And I'm not sitting around saying, hey, you know, it has to be authentic to everything we're saying. But Tom was saying in his interview with Gary Vee that his whole thing is about impact and taking people to where they are, to where they could be and want to be and will be. And you're having that with me. So I hope that you get at least the gratitude or gratification in yourself that you're doing it for me. But I know you're doing it for everybody that listens. Everybody that listens, I know, is taking something from you, and it's impacting them. So I appreciate you more than you know. So
I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. So with that, Jay and I seem to be on a every Thursday kind of thing. We do have some great, some things that have really been going on behind the scenes with LinkedIn and with connecting with people, and some lunches and some coffees and all this. So the guests that we actually do have lined up here in the next couple weeks, other than with Jay, I'm looking forward to. My calendar is slowly getting really booked, and I appreciate it, because I'm getting fed. I'm getting fed every day, and it's making my life great, and I hope it makes your life great. So listen, thank you, Jay. We will talk next week. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.